This is the fun part. I love doing the refereeing in a panel. And we've had the opportunity to hear from two of the speakers who are joining us for the panel. So I think in all fairness, I can go ahead and ask, how about, let's start with this question. Why are you here? Why do you care about this topic? And starting with who you are and where you come from. And you two go first, okay? Starting with you, Zara.
Okay, so my name is Zara Nanu, and I run a tech startup in Bristol in the UK. I might be a bit tired, so if I mumble on, please wave at me so I know I'm not coherent, because I too have spent the whole night glued to my phone trying to see what's going to happen. I run this tech company called Gapsquare, and we have developed a piece of software that helps companies in the UK currently analyze and understand their gender pay gap and then take data-driven decisions to see how they can narrow the gap. We do that because the government has introduced new regulations in April this year, making it mandatory for companies that are 250 people or more to report on the gender pay gap on an annual basis. So I guess the idea actually originated with a report from the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago, where it said that it will take 118 years for the gender pay gap to close. And I was thinking, surely that can't be right, because then it's not going to happen for me and it's not going to happen for my daughters. So something needs to happen, and this is where we thought that bringing technology and data together into diversity expertise can actually help address this issue quicker. And just as Payal was mentioning before, it was all around the idea that technology can help disrupt this. If technology can help disrupt politics and can help disrupt the way we travel, then surely technology can help disrupt gender inequality. So that's how it all started about. But actually, a couple of weeks ago, I was at the office walking through the business lounge, and I was thinking about the event today and why I'm coming. And then as I walked past the desk where a man was working on his laptop, he stopped me and he said, "Do you want to get these?" And I looked at him and I thought, what is he talking about? And there were some cups on his table, and then he looked at me again and he said, did you want to get these? And at that point I realized that he wants me to clean his cups from the table, because this is a business lounge, and the only reason a woman should be in the business lounge is because she's cleaning the cups. So that's where actually I thought, this is why I'm doing work with Gapsquare, and this is why I want to work on closing the gender pay gap.
Awesome. Well, you could have said, get your job, right? I'll take your job, yes. Petra, since you are now the, oh yes, we have the technology issue on the panel.
Sharing.
First to say, you've made the other two panelists very happy, I think, by taking some of Vesselina's recommendations, and also what Aniela was just telling us is important to follow pay equity, right? It's a key critical success factor. So, Petra, please tell us why you care about this topic.
I care about the topic because I think I combine two worlds, the academic world and the business world. In my CV, I am a molecular biologist by education, PhD in immunology. I did basic cancer research for quite some time, and was there one of the few women, though with a female sort of professor, which helped. And then switched over, as my mother would say, to the dark side of things, business consulting. I joined McKinsey, worked in McKinsey for 16 years, was a senior partner there, doing still a lot of work in the research and development area, advising large pharma companies. And I now, half a year ago, actually switched over to Accenture, where I am the CEO of our life science business, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and I lead the European R&D business within life science. And so I'm very interested and actually very convinced that girls, young women and older women, have a very meaningful role to play both in the academic as well as in the business world. But I do think, and I want to just make an ingoing statement here, I actually think at academia level it's too late. We need to think about girls in schools. And that even starts in preschool. And I live in Switzerland, I have to confess, which is, you said it to me, it's the Pakistan of Europe, and I think it's probably true in terms of some of the cultural aspects to it. And I really think that getting the girls in preschool, in school, at university, closer to those STEM subjects is very, very important. But it needs to happen very early.
This reminds me of, I believe, then what Lena shared earlier today, the gap between school systems that make young people choose effectively their study and their career paths at a very early age, and that this has a gender bias, and it makes girls get stuck or close doors to possible study and career opportunities that they may later have an issue with. So.
And often it's even the advice of a single person at a defining moment in life that really makes the difference. And I'm not sure that also all the teachers are really aware of this.
I'm afraid they aren't, but that's something that we should work on, isn't it? So you switched from McKinsey to Accenture, clearly because they're EDGE certified.
Also because of this.
Aniela, okay, we got the talk and we're all very much convinced that this is something that has to happen. But what's the fire in it for you? Why do you care about getting more women into leadership in general, but specifically in these strategic science, technology, engineering, and mathematics and medicine fields?
I was extremely lucky in my career before I co-founded EDGE certification. I was a consultant, and I spent almost a decade just before I co-founded EDGE in being a trader. And it was just a phenomenal type of job. I was trading short-term, day ahead, starting early in the morning, with a lot of phenomenal analysts providing me the data that I needed to make the decisions through the day. And at around 12 o'clock when the markets were closing, I had all the leisure to have long lunch break. I didn't have to take a day off to go to the dentist. I didn't have to take a day off to go and do some of the things that we all need to do during the week and during the working hours. And I so much appreciated my career. I was measured on my results because, of course, by midday every day, everybody knew how much I made or how much I lost. So in either way, things were very clear. And I so much appreciated this flexibility. I had a great sponsor, the head of the trading floor, who was entrusting me with those career-critical assignments. And I was kind of naive, and I thought that everybody lives in the same happy bubble as I was living. Till I realized that this is not the case. There were just a very few in the organization that were enjoying this flexibility, this freedom, this capacity to be truly judged by what they were producing and not by the face time. So I started to wonder, well, if I treasure and value this so much, would anybody treasure this? And because of being one of the few women in the industry, I was getting frequent calls to, with other interesting offers. I wouldn't have switched my company for nothing in the world because of what they were entrusting me with. So, and I was approaching my 30s, and I remember having one conversation with my head of trading who looked at me. He was American, and he said, "So, sweetheart, what are we doing? Are we having babies, or are we keeping you on the fast track where we put you on? Because this is a fast track. The only thing you can do is jump off the train. You cannot slow it down." And that was the second moment where I was like, oh, so yeah, maybe there is something we can do so that we can slow down that train, because maybe we all need to be able to slow down that train. And maybe this phenomenal flexibility, this phenomenal capacity to be judged by what I produce and not by face time, and how much time I was physically spending in the office is something that we could all benefit from. So this is how EDGE certification started.
And don't ever call me sweetheart, right? That was the...
He was American, so that was okay.
Okay. No, I'm American too. At least I've been rightly accused of being American, so we'll come back to that in a moment. But it seems, it always disturbs me when people say they were lucky, because I'm always trying to look to reverse engineer how one advances and succeeds.
Well, I was lucky because I didn't experience any of the biases. I didn't experience any of the difficulties that other women who have built a career in trading experienced. So yes, I was lucky.
I did my time as a trader, and I actually thought there was, kind of, I think part of an important element of this conversation is also about men and the stereotypes that they are forced to fill. And in my time in trading, I actually saw these horrible, psychotic, disconnected, dysfunctional behavior being rewarded. And I couldn't persist in that environment because I thought, these are just the things that I really can't identify with. But I think if you get lucky, if you are in a situation where you have sponsorship, this kind of thing, then clearly that applies to women across the board. I mean, but maybe we can talk a bit about, so reverse engineering what the success factors are for an individual woman. What stimulates your engagement in this discussion, Vesselina?
So part of it is about the pure irrationality of this. So I started my undergraduate career as a mathematician. I was one of the very few women in the maths faculty in Cambridge. And then me and my friend, both women, both switched out. She ended up doing astrophysics, ended up doing anthropology. But we both remained mathematicians at heart. And when you meet a mathematician, you know it because you like formulas that make sense. And this simply doesn't compute. It's 50-50. It's not, it's not like it's a minority issue, because we're not a minority. So the other side of it is because I'm an anthropologist. So if you go back to classic anthropology, you could say that the reason we are organized this way, with this assumption that women do the hunter-gathering and women do the caring and men go and hunt, is because of some sort of basic division of labor in society that made sense quite a while ago. It does not make sense in today's society. So we seem to be very fixed on persisting with a division of society that does not reflect what we need in today's world, and it does not compute, it does not make sense. And as we heard today, it would also lead to so much more growth to take this apart, reconfigure it, and actually focus on excellence. I mean, this audience is an audience that really understands the concept of excellence, because everybody's been dedicated to driving it. Actually focus on excellence. That means making use of all the talent in any one country, and predictably, 50% of it is going to be female.
You said this does not compute, but then you walked away from it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, in a way, this could be, I think about the gig economy, right? The patriarchy is being smashed in a lot of different ways, especially through digital technology. And the fact that, there's a ResearchGate, we can just post even academic pieces out there in the great wide world. Are they respected or not? That's another question. But is there an opportunity to actually explore your profile, for example, and still bring you back to a career with math at its center, or even better than that, an environment where you could still have pursued mathematics and not said, this is not something for me, because that's actually what our question is. How come the academic institutions are not serving the needs of women, even those women and girls who are hungry to pursue those areas, right?
Yeah.
You want to jump
Yeah,
in
no,
here?
it's really interesting because at the beginning of the week on Monday, I did a talk to about 30 young women, 14, 15-year-old.
Great.
And we were talking about women in tech, and we were talking about what a person leading a tech company looks like, and it was the usual kind of Mark Zuckerberg's, Steve Jobs type individuals. And the fascinating bit for me was that 70% of them said they don't feel like maths is their thing. They don't understand it.
What age group were they?
14, 15-year-olds. And in the conversations I was having with them, it didn't seem that the school is actually doing enough to engage them in a different way, to engage with maths. Now, it didn't, to me, that's not the end of the world because I was the same at 14 and 15, and yet, well, Vesselina jumped out of maths, I jumped into maths at 35. So I think there is that opportunity to re-qualify and re-skill at a later stage. But the important thing to take into account is that if we don't bring women into tech right now, they're going to be pushed out of the economy 50 years from now when most of the jobs are automated and we will have an economy that's run completely by men.
That's assuming that that isn't already the case, of course. But let's talk about that urgency. Now, you already pointed a finger at the education system. And you're all actually working a lot with mathematics, each one of you, data, across the board. So we need some women up here who are, okay, I'll represent the
non-math group.
Well, I like math too. I think there's also just this question about formal mathematics in academia, and how that appeals or doesn't succeed at appealing to girls and women.
So I used to work for a numeracy charity in the UK. So our main concern was the degree to which people think they're not good at maths. And this is boys and girls. It's not just girls. And that is something that needs to be solved more widely than for women. But I also think, I mean, maths is a hard sell, but the skills that I gained as a mathematician, I still use today. So every time I learn a new coding skill, I'm using formulae. The reason I know how to declare my variables is because I was declaring my variables when I was, 15, 16, saying x equals you know what. And similarly, I think about set theory when I'm thinking about a complicated bit of data that I'm trying to analyze. So I don't think you actually lose skills, but I do think there is an issue with how we communicate with people why abstract subjects are relevant. So maths is an abstract subject. There is a value to teaching that abstraction well, but the so what element is still missing. That connection between universities and the application of that is missing. And to me, it feels like we need to bring education and application closer together so that we don't lose people. Because you're also losing boys in this context. You see that one of the reasons why there is so much more parity in mathematics and in statistics and less in engineering is because in engineering you actually have quite motivated guys going, yeah, I want to do this because the maths, I see how I'm going to build something with it. Whereas the people who end up as pure mathematicians, they're attracted to the pure abstraction. And that's fewer people as well. So pure mathematicians are a small number of individuals. So we need to get people excited about taking that abstraction and applying it because it's not going to get less present because of the way technology is configured.
I agree, and I was actually teaching my 10-year-old daughter these very things this past week, and she got it very quickly, and indeed she won't lose it, I think. But what I'm more concerned about is that kids are forced at an early age to say, oh, I'm going to do this, and therefore they are not going to do that. And that you see these trends out of the OECD data, the PISA research on education, that boys track towards the hard sciences and girls track towards the so-called soft sciences, and that just kind of stays stuck, and it's very hard to reverse over time unless there is a disruption out there that gives us the opportunity to do that.
And I think this is not happening accidentally or, God-given that the boys go there and the girls go there. I mean, there's a lot of research out there that, so the success in maths in primary school and early secondary school correlates very much with, how much anxiety there is of mathematics. And that is actually true for boys and girls. Now, if you grow up in an environment where there is an implicit bias, you are a girl, therefore it's harder for you, therefore you should be more anxious, the probability that you are less good in maths is evident. I mean, there is evidence out there. And I would also point out a piece of research which I personally found very, very interesting, which actually compared two stereotypes or dealt with two stereotypes. One, girls are bad in maths, and secondly, Asians are good in maths. And so what did they do? They actually picked Asian girls and divided them in two groups just ahead of a math test. And the one group was actually reminded that they were girls, and the other group was actually reminded that they were Asian. And they had pretty much the same ingoing sort of levels in average. And you saw a statistically significant difference in outcome of that test between the group that was reminded of being a girl and the other group that was reminded of being Asian. And so it makes a huge difference, how teachers, parents, grandparents speak to those children, act with those children, and what they convey. And it's hard to control. We spoke about the unconscious bias also of men, because sometimes people aren't even aware of the fact. And it's small things. I have two sons, sending them to a programming course, they're 8 and 10 during the summer break. People would say it's a very normal thing. Now they have a cousin, 10 years old, so my son and his cousin, they are 7 months apart. She's a girl. Her parents would never ever think about the fact putting her into a programming course in summer camp. No, she goes horseback riding. And so there are things that are being done to those kids very, very early on, and it's also us parents, grandparents, teachers that actually need to be very aware of what we are doing to those children, at that vulnerable age.
So one thing we could stop doing, I think all of us in this room is, well, certainly you wouldn't be guilty of that, but Michelle Obama, for example, is guilty of saying publicly that she's not good at math. So that's something that I always advocate for us to just stop doing, or saying, oh, I'm not, apologizing for our lack of math skills.
Well, it could still be, but it hasn't anything to do with the fact that you're a woman. You were very good at math.
But if you always see
women, I mean, you also
women
have boys
publicly
that are bad in
admitting
math.
Constantly that they're not good at math, kind of keeps the stereotype alive, I think. So I think it's better just to not say anything at all then, right?
And make the same offers to boys and girls on, extra classes in school, extracurricular activities. Why make a distinction? That shouldn't happen, Go with what the kid likes and go with what the kid's good at, but don't steer them into a direction.
Isn't this the thing, though, that you see? I used kind of the banana pie example. I mean, I don't know how you ended up on the trade floor, for example, because that takes some guts. I would imagine, looking left and right, you don't see a lot of women doing that, which is why it's pretty awesome. But was there something in your environment? Because, people say a lot, well, maybe it's because girls don't like tech that they don't do it. And yet I've seen examples of, there's an excellent high school for technique and science right here in Berlin that has a women's only bachelor program in tech. It's 3 times subscribed for the number of spots that it has. So I kind of use this, the banana cream pie example. I say, how do you know that you don't like banana cream pie if you've never tried it? How do you know that girls don't like tech if they haven't ever tried it? And I think there is indeed a role for people in the environment to kind of say, maybe you should not do that pony riding class today. Maybe you should go do some coding. And of course, there are best practices around getting girls to do that. But did you have this in your environment, or what made you just be fearless, I guess?
Oh, I think that, Cheryl, you're bringing up a very important point. The role models and how important they are. Seeing is believing. And there is, when it comes to role models and what we were discussing, one of the things that is not mentioned so often is that, yes, we do see a gap when it comes to girls' performance in maths, but
hold up, we see a gap in their participation, but if you
remember the numbers that were showed this morning at the 15 years of age,
yes,
there is a gap. But at the same time, there is a gap when it comes to boys in reading.
Yes.
And there is a very interesting study published by Iris Bonet from the Harvard Kennedy School, and she discusses this study in her book called Gender Equality by Design, where the gender of the teacher does matter.
Very important.
So, of course, the primary school teachers are mainly female. So, girls have more affinity with them, boys less so. As we progress, some of these core subjects start to be picked up by men with whom boys start to have an affinity and girls not. So that's the first thing. The second thing, we run a very interesting project with Yale University in looking at the images that they had around the campus of scientists, writers, alumni that they valued. And when we looked at the gender of those people whose portraits were hanged in Yale University, less than 5% were women. And it's not because the university didn't have bright female graduates, but we went with what was the most common instead of purposefully searching the counter-stereotypical example. And then if we go further, Cheryl, you talked earlier today about, the fictional role models. Well, let me tell you that. We don't need fictional role models. Those women are out there. We just need to do a better job in unveiling and in talking about them. How many of you know that the UN Space Agency is run by a woman? The person who makes the decisions of what we do in space, in terms of space programs, that actually selects the astronauts that are out there, is a woman. She's an astrophysicist and a phenomenal woman. How many of us knew? I didn't know before I sat with her on a panel. So I think that these are the kind of things. So, reality beats fiction. All the time. We just need to be better in purposefully searching and talking about those counter-stereotypical examples.
So not only, fiction can always help, if it's a cartoon or something, that there be as many girls in the cartoon as boys, but indeed, real media, so news coverage, or even women as experts being...
Or even movies that talk about real stories. Think about Hidden Figures, right?
Yes.
I don't know if you followed, but immediately after, Lego started to do and to include, I think it took them 1 month, and they started to include those female scientists in the game sets that went to children. So, it's a very, very powerful way.
Unlike Star Wars, of course, that kind of made me mad.
We are working on that.
Okay, yes. But the topic is actually industry supporting gender equality in academia, or if you want to be more specific, sharing across these sectors. What are the drivers to that? Where are the roadblocks? Why isn't it happening today? What is it that we need to be doing to facilitate that, you think, Vesselina?
Well, some industries are actually doing good work to support gender parity. And if you think of GE's new advert series using female scientists, popularizer. I don't know about you guys, but I actually teared up when I watched this, because there's that effect of actually seeing a prominent female figure treated with that level of heroism. So I think industries are making strides, and a lot of the companies we partner with have campaigns in which they've made a lot of effort to portray gender parity in the roles being done. So aside from that public image opportunity that companies have to actually showcase that they care and they can shift the image of women, I do think that there are also very good practices being put into effect. And I think you're very right. It's more of an art than a science. We don't know what is going to make the ultimate difference to any one company, but they're good efforts. So I think the opportunity there is for every industry that wakes up and suddenly realizes, actually, we have a larger problem than the others, because we saw there is a lot of gendered industries still, to actually look across and see what has been done. And I think maybe that's appropriate to this audience, because although there are very particular aspects of the academic career path, there's still commonalities in what you need to put into place.
I also get this impression, and I don't know, it's kind of a zombie figure. How many of you heard of that 1 million jobs that will go unfilled in Europe by 2020 in the tech sector if we don't change, if we continue with business as usual? I mean, I think there were great statistics about if we increase gender balance in STEM, we will see this 3% impact on GDP by 2050, 850 million more, or was it billion? Wow, in the economy. Is there a statistic about that? Because I'm also thinking industry, if you think about it, even R&D in industry, and that's very closely tied to academia, and and more privatization of RD&I. I just think they're the ones who are the most compelled to actually address these challenges, because they have the burning need to put people in those empty jobs, essentially. So, and you do hear the clamoring around the education system is not living up to the needs that we have. Academia is, still very much in its silo. So what have we seen there as far as the, the flowing or the demand from industry, the engagement of industry? I mean, they can make demands, but actually if they don't step in and say, we're doing these things and this works, or if they're not trying to make partnerships to address these challenges, then they will be the ones most harmed, in fact.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm one of those people who was set to have a career in academia. So I did my master's, I did my PhD, and then when it was time to go and have a postdoc, I realized that if I'm going to stay in academia, I'm going to have very little engagement with what's happening in the industry and what's happening in practice. And that's when I thought, actually, I'm more interested in seeing how the practice works. And I felt like I can engage more with academia from the outside than I'd be able to engage with the outside world if I stayed in academia. So it is actually what's happening now. I'm engaging with a lot of universities in the UK, and we're sharing experience. But I think this is a tipping point, and technology is driving that tipping point forward for academic world to link up with industry. Otherwise, they're going to go on two separate tracks and become irrelevant.
Can you tell me, and I'd like to hear, Petra, you too, what you think about this, but can you tell me where you think the added value is, or what the added value is going to be from these two players? So look at, we talk a lot in Europe about public-private partnership, right? This is kind of the model of engagement in Europe. What does this public-private partnership impacting gender balance in STEM? What does it look like? What are the different parties bringing to the discussion that creates the synergistic effect of engaging together.
Yeah, I think it's the collective thinking and the fact that it's two different types of thinking. If you look at genders, the two genders are very different in their thinking, and therefore when you put them together, they're more likely to develop something transformative and revolutionary than if they do that.
I'm talking like especially about academia
Yeah.
versus industry. You said you're straddling it
Yeah.
now. You really said I'm going for the, the business angle.
Yeah.
What do you see as the advantages that academia and business can bring to that?
It's the fact that they would put their thinking together, and it's very different thinking on both sides.
Okay. What is that different thinking? I mean, you have a very strong academic background as well, and a business.
So I agree with you about the complementarity. So I'm maybe not an expert in that topic, but I see actually very little effort in collaboration, systematic collaboration between industry and academia as it relates to STEM and as it relates to women. I do think there is still a lot of thinking around, we want to get the best postdocs, we want to get the best, graduates? Graduates.
Yes.
And gender sort of is a bit of a secondary topic to that, as long as, through a certain program, I'm speaking pharma industry, can actually get access to the best researchers, the best scientific talent, and they fund, PhDs, there are certain programs, but there isn't a lot about gender in there. There isn't an explicit effort to say we will actually not be able to long-term fill the required pipeline of scientists if we are not addressing this problem. To me, it feels a little bit still like everybody knowing smoking, is harmful, but, you still smoke. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit the same thing here.
So how about the example of that was me. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. But maybe I can float this to you then. The Athena Swan. The uptake of that you saw came as a result of decision makers in the public sector saying, this is something that we want to see. How about for private industry? How about replicating and scaling these kinds of... Don't see that.
Yeah, there are certification frameworks that are looking to the private sector. And I think on the question of how do you bring industry and academia closer together, I mean, they have very different positions in the kind of value chain, so to say.
Speak to what the values are that they bring.
Well, for one, academia has this unquestioning dedication to quality and a longer time frame. So if you're in business, in industries, you do have a lot more time pressures. You have a shorter time frame to develop your thinking. And sometimes that can be great because agile thinking is really valuable. But sometimes it means that you don't have the time to incubate concepts in the same way. And I think academia has that capacity. And it also has a real heartland of knowing the quality of methodology. And I think industry does look to that. I think everybody recognizes that academics have that excellence in there. I think the question is more on the flow, on the practice end of this. Mm-hmm. And we were talking a little bit with a few other participants actually on the flow between the two. So it should be possible for academics to move into industry and for industry individuals to move into academia easier. And that would actually help that exchange a lot more. And I don't know if you have heard, there's a great study that came out of the Australian Chief Scientist's Office, which was premised on school education, where they had school teachers go into different industries and map the mathematical content of the jobs that people were doing, and feed that back into how you build the mathematical curriculum for children in a way that really makes them understand the work they're going to be doing. So that fixed the business problem, because employers are constantly saying, we get people who are not numerate. And this is not all right. So it's trying to fill that gap, but at the same time, it's illustrating to those teachers a larger purpose than just, okay, I'm just teaching the curriculum this year. Actually, you realize you're teaching the future workforce of a country. It's a huge role.
Can I ask just quickly, just to scan the audience, how many of you identify yourselves as coming from academia? From business, industry? How about policy? Other, just shout it out. If I missed you, if you didn't fall into any of those categories. Foundations, so NGO, research, gender experts, okay. So that's actually already a pretty good mix. I think what I'm hearing is we don't even have the forum, really, yet, to share what's happening in the private sector with what's happening in academia, and being able to compare two kinds of experiences. We both come up with a kind of certification program. What are the touch points? Where are the things that we might have missed something that's maybe irrelevant or maybe very relevant to the private sector, to business, and vice versa? So perhaps this is already a kind of learning, I would say, is just to have the forum to start comparing notes and seeing, I think what we've heard, and maybe that is also where a bit of the frustration that I sense is happening here, or what can we do next questions, is because we haven't really done this before. We haven't all sat around the table and said, okay, as industry and as academia, first and foremost, this is a problem. We actually want to see more gender.
Exactly, but you see, that is why it's not happening. I think the common starting point is not clear. There isn't a common understanding that we have a joint problem that we need to jointly resolve, and this is why there isn't a forum, this is why there isn't enough exchange.
So can I ask that question? Who agrees that lack of gender balance in STEM is a problem? So now we've underscored that question, that answer.
But that's a conceptual, I mean, it's like, conceptually it's clear to everybody. Conceptually it's clear to every CEO. Conceptually it's clear to many, many people. But then you have different motivations of doing something. So there's a group of people who do nothing because they feel, doesn't affect me, next generation, I don't care, people are ignorant, I don't know. There are other people that do something. Some people do it simply, and I'm coming from the business side, because of political correctness. You cannot today say you're not doing something for diversity, gender equality, you can't say it. But that doesn't mean that you mean it. And that doesn't mean, even if you're a CEO of a big multinational, you're truly behind this. I've seen very, very little people in business, despite all the statements, that manage this question like they would manage their business. Clear KPIs, clear actions, following up on these, consequence management if a manager doesn't deliver. It's not happening. It's not high up enough on anybody's agenda.
And yet it doesn't seem like rocket science. I mean, I have to say, I'm approached regularly with the question, with this attitude. We'd really love to do something, but we don't know what. And then my response is, but this is simple organizational change management. Like I said, Aniela, are you encountering this too? Because if there's someone who sees where, at least industry, is putting their money where their mouth is, it would be you. How real is the posturing vis-a-vis what's actually taking place on the front line, and how about that whole learning curve of, if you really want to make it happen, we've got the plan, who's going to execute the plan with us?
So I think
be honest.
I think in the quiz I showed you already the numbers, right? 74%, and how many really believe that that's the case. But let me not focus on those. Let me focus on those who succeed, because there are organizations that succeed. And one of the things that we have learned that works very well is simply understanding that, yes, human nature is phenomenal but imperfect. Our minds are biased. We are all attached to certain ways that we know, to certain ways in which we succeed, that we tend to believe that they are the universal ways to succeed. and trying to change individual behaviors. I will use the words of Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize laureate for behavioral economics. It's a fool's errand. So trying to change one behavior after another will not get us too far. Instead, what we can do to succeed is what the hotel industry did in a very smart way with one thing. You remember the days when we were getting in our hotel rooms and we had small signs, please do not forget to switch off the light when you leave the room. I care about the environment, you care about the environment. Every now and then, I just forgot. I got out of the room, I forgot to switch off the light, because that's human nature, it's imperfect. With all my best intentions, trying to change my behavior works. 4 out of 10, and then maybe next time 6 out of 10, 10 out of 10, we will never achieve it. And because they realized that that's the case, what did they do? They built in the central switch. So they no longer rely on me remembering to switch off the lights. When I'm not in the room and I'm taking my key card off, well, the system does the thing to interrupt that behavior. And this is exactly what we see successful organizations doing, building processes and practices that act as bias interrupters, that act as central switch, that ensure that the individual behavior and the biases that might be vehiculated by an individual behavior, which we all have, and we all display them, even when we don't expect to do, that the influences of these individual behaviors are diminished by these frameworks of policies and practices that really act as bias interrupters. That's what we have seen working, and I'm very biased in my opinion in thinking that probably that's the only way that works.
That's a little bit of a pessimistic view on what we can train people up to do.
I gave you the solution.
Okay. Just throw the switch. That's kind of the nuclear option, right? I'm actually charged now with wrapping this up. But I think I don't want to spend time talking me, so I think this is a really unique opportunity, and I'm going to take the fiat of the moderator, I'm afraid, Chris, because it's really fortunate, I think, that you've got the 4 of them here. Can we go ahead and take a couple of questions from the floor or feedback on what you've heard, even some best practices that you've seen that you might want to share? Is there anyone out there who'd like to? If not, I'm happy to barrel on towards the finish.
Yes. My name is Anna Mitnerova. I'm from Czech Republic, Prague, University of Chemistry and Technology. And I've got experience that the industry is very helpful, because we are here, for example, L'Oreal, who has the award for women annually. We have a Procter & Gamble, and they are organizing women in science. We have the Amgen, it is worldwide cooperation, and they sponsor teacher and secondary school pupils in STEM subjects. And all these projects are running, but we have a little bit problem with grant agencies. We have really linked the industry with the academia. Thank you.
I think there's also the IEEE with their whole women's network, so clearly there are industry-led initiatives that...
But it's not yet the switch.
It's not yet the switch. Payel, would you like to... I'm glad you stuck around and want to contribute again.
Actually, I was just going to add a comment to sort of, the closing around that hotel example, and I thought actually there's also the carrot and the stick, right? And there's the positive psychology and the nudge around all of this to change behavior. Very similar hotel example where they looked at, trying to get people not to sort of have their towels washed every day, right? Now, if you're at home, you're not washing your towel every single day, at least I don't think the majority of us are. But when you go to the hotel, you drop it on the floor, and then you're expecting the fresh towel there the next day. So they started putting notes in the room where they said, conserve environment, etc. And, those who did it, those who didn't. But as you said, they actually then started making it personal. They said, 80% of people in this room have chosen not to actually have their towels recycled every single day. I hope you will do your part in conserving the environment. And immediately you saw a shift, right? So I think a little bit is also around the positive nudge that we can make and actually the role modeling that goes along with that. So I'm just trying to kind of, as you said, bring it on a bit more of a positive note as well.
Yes. Well, I'm going to then go ahead and thank our panel, I think, but please don't leave. Stay right here, because I'm going to make it very simple. I unfortunately didn't get to enjoy the entire first day of this event with you, but in my own humble opinion, I think the gathering of this group, especially with the diversity that is represented not only here but also in terms of the participants, to me would indicate that this kind of thing, this being the first of its kind, should be replicated. So for me, that is a definite going forward, what must we do step. I think bringing the same individuals and organizations back, but also asking us to come with those stories and those partners with whom we work, who can also get up here and share the practices that they are engaging in that work. That is a definite next step. And on a final note, I think also it's good to have the switch out there kind of as the stick, right? When things don't go wrong, you're going to get the nuclear option. But I think it was Gandhi who said, be the change that you want to see. And Gloria Steinem, who I had the distinct pleasure of meeting yesterday, who said, we need to build the society that we want to see by engaging in the kind of actions that reflect that society. So it's not about the means justifying the end, but the means actually engaging the end to achieve the end. So I'm now putting the onus back on you. You've been here, you have connected. I know the obstacles are out there. I have my own startup promoting participation of girls and women in the tech sector, because I understood that if it was going to happen, it would come down to me doing it. So it's not only down to me, but it's down to each and every one of you. And I think as an organization that we should also follow up what has come out of the individual sessions this weekend, give you tasks, some KPIs, some objectives, and some measurable, smart indicators that we can follow up with you about. And then I say, let's see you again. Let's see all of us again in a year, if not sooner. And thank you all, and thank our wonderful panel and all the speakers for being here. See you in 12 months.